So the themes we've heard this morning provide the background for the panel, The Future of Cities, as we explore how technology will shape our municipalities. Joining us on the panel today are Sean Holman with Ellis Associates, Ulysses Vinson with San Mateo County Labs, SMC Labs, Keshia Theobald Van Gent with GSVLabs, and Barrie Hathaway with JobTrain. Each of them are going to tell us just a bit about their organization, and we have one other prepared question, then a few more, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. But this is a real opportunity to hear from people that are in the trenches helping our communities. So Mark, do you want to kick it off? Do you want to kick it off with Keshia?
Why don't we go, this way. Keshia, please tell us a little bit about GSVLabs and what you've been working on.
Yeah, so my name is Keshia Theobald Van Gent. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at GSVLabs. So I work actually mostly with our enterprise clients. But GSVLabs really supports the innovation ecosystem. So we support early stage startups. We have been now for 6, almost 7 years here in Silicon Valley, as well as Boston. We're opening 2 centers in London and Pittsburgh next year. So we're excited about that. We're growing. We support those early stage companies. We also work with a lot of universities, nonprofits, to help them support their innovation ecosystems. And like I said, my team, we work with a lot of large corporations to support their innovation needs and share best practices.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And we're going to do kind of round robin?
Yes. So,
perfect.
Yep.
Hi. Hi, my name is Ulysses Vinson. I'm Director of SMC Labs. It's a smart region initiative that we kicked off as part of the technology group in the county, ISD, with the leadership of John Welton, who's our CIO. And most of you have heard smart city initiatives. So we created a smart region initiative. So we wanted to make sure that we don't believe that technology should stop at the borders of each individual city. Within San Mateo County, we have 20 of those, and we also have the large unincorporated area that is under the purview of the county. So what we did was we kicked off an IoT World conference last year, and it was really cool. And what we did, we met with a lot of the cities, because we want to do 2 things, really. We wanted to, number one, make government, see how we can make government more efficient and work better and more responsive for the people. And how do you do that? So you work with agencies within the county. So whether it's public works to public health, work with them and see what type of problems that they're having and see if there's some type of innovation or innovative solution that could improve service delivery. And the other one is improving the quality of life for the people that live and work and visit the county of San Mateo. So with that said, when you talk about IoT, it's a kind of a, not everyone knows what that really means, but one of the things that San Mateo has done really successfully is connect people. So we have this really amazing network of public Wi-Fi throughout the county. We have over 80 public Wi-Fi hotspots. And I know in 2019, you're kind of saying, well, why do we still have public Wi-Fi? But even here in the heart of Silicon Valley, there are a huge portion of the county that is not connected to the internet. So that's why with Benny Lee, who's here, who heads that project, we have over 80 sites. So using that as like a backdrop of, okay, that's connecting people, because you can't be a smart region unless your people are connected, right? So how do we connect things, and how do we make, whether it's a sensor network or whether it's air quality that we've been doing for the last year, how do we have new data so we can make really important decisions based on this data and improving the service delivery? So that's what we've been doing, and so we're very excited, and we work with county agencies as well as the cities.
Awesome. Thanks, Ulysses. Sean.
Hi. So I work with a consulting group called Ellis Associates, and we work at the intersection of transportation and technology to help cities, partners, to start to rethink how they are going to address the new challenges in transportation. We're working currently with LADOT, amongst others, to rethink that a bit. And the reason we're doing this is that we think that that transportation is a public service and a public right, and cities are the caretaker of that. And right now, they are being left behind by many of the transportation services that are evolving in the cities and being brought by private sector. Cities want to enable that, but they need a new set of tools, a new toolbox to address that. And today we're seeing, I mean, we all think rideshare, but you know, if you looked at the New York Times this week, we're talking about New York, you know, same-day deliveries of 1.5 million now on the streets, causing all sorts of, you know, chaos. So those kinds of problems exist today. Tomorrow we're talking about, you know, drone deliveries, or I really liked the discussion about autonomous transit. I think is critical, and we think that cities have the right motives to go build sustainable, equitable transportation for citizens, and we are going to help them do that using open source and open standards to really change the way that they start to interact with these new types of technology services.
Awesome, great. Barrie, good to see you.
Good morning, good to see you too. I like to say I'm Barrie from JobTrain. Guess what we do? It's a pretty straightforward name for a not very straightforward thing that we do. JobTrain is a nonprofit workforce development organization that was founded in 1965, and we're on the border of Menlo Park and East Palo Alto. We're founded with the fundamental idea that all of us deserve the dignity of work and to earn a living wage. And over the 65 years of JobTrain's existence, we've created this very robust, broad, and deep set of services to help people who are unemployed or underemployed gain access to career pathways that are going to lead them to middle-class wages, what we call economic mobility. And the way it works at JobTrain is we have really fundamentally, in its simplest level, 3 versions of services that meet the individual exactly where they are and help move them up that ladder to economic mobility. At the very basic level, we offer a breadth of what we call stabilization services. So if you're very, very low income, your life has become quite unstable, and sometimes you end up in crisis. So these stabilization services allow an individual to have food security and housing security and access to benefits that are due to them in their circumstances that allow them to stabilize and get out of crisis. At the next level, we bring in a sort of a middle level of skills upgrading for somebody who wants that career pathway but isn't quite ready yet. Things like English as a second language, access to high school equivalency or a GED, ubiquitous digital literacy skills. So there's a middle level of skills that are useful in the moment, but also will leverage you to a career pathway. And then finally, ultimately, our work is really around the career pathways. That, for us, is 4 different pathways and 6 options. Within those pathways, that's healthcare options, construction trade options, technology career options, and culinary arts options. So altogether, our program is simply to help adults who live in the Bay Area who are underemployed or unemployed gain access to the fantastic jobs and careers in the region that are available to them, and that employers are starving for talented people to be in those jobs.
So Barrie, we heard about the future of work from Jenny Dearborn this morning, her thoughts on the future of work. So I'd like you to expand on where you see the future of work from the JobTrain perspective and actually the boots on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, we're all wringing our hands about what's the future of work, but I want to tell a quick little anecdote. When I was in the 80s, the late 80s, I worked for a company you may have heard of called Sun Microsystems. Before I came to the nonprofit sector, I spent about 20 years in the for-profit sector. And in the 80s, Sun was a very forward-thinking company at the time. The leadership was visionary, and they got all of us together, everybody who worked at Sun together, and said, we need to tell you something. This was at a period where we still might have an idea that we could work for the same company for our entire careers. And Scott McNeely said, that's not how it's going to be here. We'll have you work for us as long as you have skills that we need. And so be prepared to stay relevant to the needs of our business. And we'll help you by providing you with access to dollars for education if you need to get some education to move to the next thing. So while I think we're still wringing our hands about what are the jobs of the future and what jobs are going away, what jobs are coming, we can agree pretty well on one thing, that the future of work is workers that are flexible, workers that are willing to stay in touch with where jobs are going and reskill for those jobs. You know they're already changing so fast that if we think that we can go to college and get a degree and earn and develop skill, and that's going to be what we're going to do for the rest of our career, we're already at a non-starting position. So I think it is the future of work is be ready to be a lifelong learner, keep track of where jobs are going, and reskill for those jobs at the right time.
How many folks in the audience, by a show of hands, consider yourself lifelong learners? Okay, so it's I don't think there's one person that didn't put their hand up. No. So you're all in a good place.
Keshia, what are some mega trends? So I know that at GSVLabs, you mentioned that you work with companies and nonprofits of all different kind of shapes and sizes. What are some of the mega trends that you see impacting organizations most today from a business and service delivery perspective?
Sure. So I was thinking about being here today and thinking, do I fit in and do I have something to add to this conversation?
Yes.
I hope so. But I think, in business, we talk a lot about trends. What's going on today, what's going to be going on tomorrow, and where should we invest? At the end of the day, GSVLabs is an operational company, but we are a family of companies, and several of those other family members are big VCs. So it's always top of mind for us. And some of the trends that I think are really relevant that we talk about every day, that I think everyone in the audience is probably facing as well, two come to mind. So one is simply the speed of disruption. Innovation is not something that we get to talk about anymore. It's something that we have to deal with. And if we're not willing to innovate, we're not going to be here. And that is true, just as true in the private sector as it is in the public sector. One example of this that I absolutely love is it took the telephone 50 years to reach 50 million users. Right, it's pretty impressive. 50 million is a lot of people. The telephone was very expensive. It took the cell phone 12 years. Took the internet 7 years. Took Twitter 2 years. And it took Pokemon Go 19 days.
Wow.
The cost of computing today is astronomically low, and the power of computing is inversely going up every day. It is, startups, new ideas are able to reach 10 million people in a heartbeat. Most of you probably have Twitter, and hopefully in a very positive way know that. Politics aside. But another trend that we talk a lot about is what we call the class of 2020. So adults that are graduating college today are the class of 2020, and they are digital natives. So never in their entire lives have they ever grown up without a computer. You probably remember your first computer. I remember mine. I was maybe 12, 15. It was in the living room, and you had to get off the phone to use it, right?
Dial-up.
Dial-up. That was like AIM. Remember AIM? Yeah. Kids today, adults entering the workforce today, educated adults, have never had that experience. So when we talk about delivering services and goods to the next generation, not just the next generation of consumers, but of workers, we're talking about a generation that it does not understand a world where you don't have instant, ubiquitous information at your fingertips always. It's a different mindset. We talk a lot about delivery. Uber Eats just announced that they're going to, in San Diego early next year, start using drones. The delivery times, right? Amazon took us to 2 days. Amazon has now set a new benchmark for themselves, saying that one-day delivery will be the new industry standard. I work with a lot of corporates. It's not an issue of, will it be the new industry standard? It's when, and then, dear God, what happens next? So, I think that all of this is really relevant. So, from a kind of for-profit background and some of the things that we're talking about, I think, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have some high school interns in the office, and we joke that they teach us how to use Snapchat, and we teach them how to use a desktop.
Yeah.
So it's we've got a lot to learn.
The desktop is what you plug your laptop into for the bigger screen,
There
right?
we go.
Yeah.
I wish in government technology. Speaking of government technology, Ulysses, where was my question? Oh, what are some of the biggest challenges for scaling innovation on a county-wide level, for example? So like in San Mateo County.
Yeah, I think the sheer scope of the geography of the county is obviously a challenge. You know, by nature of the coastal side, there's the folks that live there and work there have different needs, different levels of infrastructure available to them. So as we move to looking at what's the needs of the coastal side, and you traverse from north to south, bordering San Francisco and Palo Alto, the biggest challenge is kind of how do we scale whatever works in one of our 2 innovation zones, which right now it's County Center here in Redwood City and in East Palo Alto. And we're also moving into downtown Millbrae. The councilwoman is here. We've been working with them on creating an ecosystem of piloting use cases such as smart irrigation, air quality monitoring. We ask the city and say, hey, what is it, something that we can do? And again, we're looking at this to be a hub for knowledge. So whatever we do in any one of these locations, we have data, we have that experience that we can share throughout the county. So one of our biggest challenges is scaling it throughout. We don't want it to just, if it happens in Redwood City, we want to make sure it happens in Daly City. So that's a challenge. But I think the beauty outside of the challenge is we have really good leadership in our county. We have board of supervisors who have been very supportive. Supervisor Slocum understands it, he gets it. He has a big focus on one of our areas of concern, which is the North Fair Oaks, Middlefield Road. We also have leadership in our county manager who has been very supportive of the lab and wanting to make sure that government is more efficient. Mike Collegy, who I think is here. And I think one of the other challenges, to be honest with you, is this is kind of the first time, this is a paradigm shift as it relates to how internally government works, right? So everything's in silos. So now all of a sudden you have departments working together, and I just use air quality as a big example because it's the major thing going on in the area because of the wildfires, is that now with air quality monitoring and that data, that hyper-local data that we're now collecting, we're sharing it with the Office of Sustainability, who is responsible for the county's climate action plan, right? And then we're sharing it with public health officials who's responsible for responding, epidemiologists who are responding to the needs of patients who are, facing asthma attacks as a result of wildfire. These 2 groups never talked before. They just kind of, I got this and I got that. But now they're actually talking. And it's really cool and we now training, I think, is a big deal because now, I'm not a coder by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm sitting there learning, SQL language and commands because I need to do big queries on data related to air quality. I'm not a meteorologist. So this is all new. I'm just a geeky tech person, like our team. We're just trying to provide the infrastructure. So that's kind of a challenge. But I think people are starting to get it. Public Works now understands a lot of the things they have been doing all these years has been IoT. That smart light that you put up that's now connected, that's a form of Internet of Things. So it's just getting them used to it and creating that engagement and having the cities think outside of the borders of their cities to say, look, whatever our experience in Burlingame, as El Camino Real has been that discussion today, as we go through from Daly City all the way up to Atherton, it shouldn't be a different experience as I'm driving through that one quarter, that 43 square miles. So whatever tech, it should be scaled through the whole thing. And we're not just looking at the IoT piece. I think I saw Mike Futrell, who's an amazing leader in South San Francisco, where we created an affordable housing application where it's a one-stop shop where we know in the county, which didn't exist before, where these are all the units that are online or will be online. That's available to people who need affordable housing. San Francisco already did it. There was no need for the county to reinvent the wheel. So we used South San Francisco as the pilot city to start launching these types of things. So I think the challenge is scaling to every city because there's 20 of them, and also getting the departments to 8 county agencies to talk to each other.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Sean, you have a very captive audience here. There are all the elected officials and appointed officials. Can you raise your hand? All the nonprofits, all the educators, business community, multi-person representative, just multiple agency representative. I'm trying to figure out because some of you wear multiple hats. So with Sean's particular skill set, I'm wondering how you can help our audience understand how they can better use, the public sector can better take examples from the private sector, and what tips would you give all of these folks?
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, that's a great question, and one of the reasons I was excited to kind of come here is that my background is in tech. I've been a software engineer and now, technical product manager, and obviously, in this area, this has been one of the most innovative places in the world. I think what the public sector has to start learning is that the pace of technology is moving faster than any one organization or company can manage, and that there has to be embrace of common standards and open source as a means to start to build interoperability and to share the efforts that are done, in Los Angeles, in New York, in Chicago, in San Francisco, and start to build tools and ecosystem around to address the real technological challenges and start to cover that gap that's happened. The companies are not going to slow down, but the cities are going to have to change their relationship to them. And so I think what I'm really excited about, what LA's been doing is rethinking how they interact with an open source ecosystem and start to bring cities together around transportation standards and technology that they can all benefit from.
So can you give us, because some folks in the audience, and I'm not trying to say we all don't know what open source means, but just give us examples of how LA uses open source.
Yeah, thank you. So what I've been working on for the last year with LA is taking something that evolved out of NACTO, which is a transportation organization, and Salita Reynolds is the head of LADOT, and thinking around what are, as transportation changes so rapidly, what is the blueprint for the streets, the infrastructure, the public right-of-way that they manage look like? And I saw some good pictures of where it is starting to go, and I think what we've been doing is helping take that visionary urban planner view and turn it into real technology actionable plan that they can start to do. And in the case of LA, what that is something called mobility data specifications. And this is them taking the problem that they see coming with micromobility as and I say problem, a challenge. It is, LA loves the concept of micromobility, loves the idea of less cars on the streets. But how do you not have the chaos that we've seen coming in San Francisco, in San Diego, and still allow this type of new innovative solution to scale? And so they took to GitHub and put out standards that said, here's how companies can register their vehicles, and we can start to manage and actually tell those operators what the policies are. So you can't ride in Venice Beach on the boardwalk, right? Like, that's a simple policy. But as we start to they wanted to address some of the other problems they knew were becoming of over-densification. How do you start to express those policies digitally so that the companies that are out there that are operating digitally can know where to put their vehicles and how to best follow the guidelines that the city is putting in place? And so that evolved into a set of open source standards that LA put out to the GitHub and was adopted now, I think, by 80 cities have started to use these standards. So there's a clear adoption and need from other cities to start to think more broadly about how to manage this new data and interaction with a very complex new type of transportation operator that's on the city streets.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to open it up? Or?
Sure. In one sec. I've got
Okay,
one last follow-up question for Ulysses. So you talked about some of the challenges of integrating and updating technology, especially in the public sector. Or could you talk about that a little bit more? I mean, something that a lot of folks like to say, I wish government operated more like a business. Mm-hmm. But once you've worked in government, you see that the incentives that we have in government and the incentives and the impacts that society puts on government discourage innovation and discourage risk. Because even though lots of private companies like Google, I'm sure, have billions of dollars a year and research and development, and some things work and some things fail. If anything fails in the public sector, it's at the top of the full front page of the newspaper, and people get their wrists slapped or worse for doing that. So how do you change kind of the internal culture of government to embrace technology more?
Yeah, great question. I think, that kind of goes to the heart of why we created the lab environment to begin with. So we call it's basically a little sandbox, if you will. Like, these are all very new technologies, and a lot of it is unknown. We don't know. They haven't been proven yet, some of it. We're talking about different levels of how these devices connect, whether it's on our public Wi-Fi networks or from cellular. Is it going to be 5G? Is it LoRaWAN? We're getting a little technical here. But all these platforms, there are no standards. Same things with the air quality monitors. There are no standards. So there's very little data out there. So we're testing it. So we're doing it on the front end, and it's very exciting, because I think this is one of the few times in history that government is actually ahead of the curve. At least we feel. When we talk to the technology companies, they're like, they kind of need us more than we need them, because we are the living use cases, right? We're responsible for public safety. We're responsible for keeping our streets and our parks clean. We're responsible for all these various different things. They want to prove that their little technologies and their gadgets work, their hardware works. So for us, we're like, and I'll tell you, some things that have came in through our lab environment worked better than others. So we try to say, like, let's test multiple vendors on that same use case, right? So whether it's, for me, one of my biggest pet peeves in life as it relates to government services, overflowing trash cans at parks. And because if it's going to be 80 degrees anywhere in the Bay Area, the parks are probably going to fill. So therefore, if I can get my weather station that I have in East Palo Alto to talk to that little sensor in the garbage can, the trash receptacle, saying, hey, chances are you're going to be over, it's going to be, garbage, out of the garbage can, then you have these devices talking to each other who could let public works, whoever's responsible, to know we need to gear up for this, right? Same thing with water. My other pet peeve is water. I hate it when it's on a schedule and it's raining and the irrigation system is on, because it's just on a calendar schedule, right? But those are kind of things where we can use very low-powered things that are very inexpensive, that you can throw them away in 3 years. That can say, okay, it's dry enough for the irrigation system to now operate. And these are really, really small little nuggets, but these are kind of the things that we can prove out and see how it works and work with the department, because we're just piloting this stuff, right? Once it works and is deemed successful, then we can say, hey, Public Works, you own this. And you can use that to make your operations and your service delivery more efficient. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We're not really doing full, except for air quality, we're doing a lot more there, because it's so important and paramount now. And people want localized data and for air quality, not just that one sensor that the Bay Area Quality District provides for us today, but more than that. So we have more hyper-local data.
That's awesome. Please.
Maybe Keshia and Barrie could, because that's a great question, weigh in, and then we will open it up to Q&A. So we'll give you plenty of time.
So congratulations. This is an amazing accomplishment, and I am somewhat ashamed that I didn't know more about your organization. This is exactly what we tell the corporations that we work with. This is the ideal situation for an innovation team. You're not going out there and saying, oh, here's a new technology, full deployment tomorrow. It's going to cost millions. It's going to be great. And in 3 years, we'll have to do it again because nobody thought through these 10 issues that are inevitably going to pop up. But failing fast, failing early, small experiments, super impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at that. We're making connections within San Mateo County. Right? Who would have thunk it? Connect19.
Barrie, do you want to share something with the audience, like what they need to leave with in terms of how you can help them or where they should help you?
I guess that's such a broad question, and I would say that we at JobTrain, we do such good work, and yet we know that we're only going to be able to go so far with the work we do if we think we're going to do it in a vacuum. And part of what we're doing now, and Rosanna's part of this, and a couple members of the audience, Vera and Alan, we're bringing together cross-sector stakeholders to try and develop sort of a regional vision for workforce development. And if we can come up with a regional vision, then we think this sector group of stakeholders, elected officials, corporations, other organizations like JobTrain, educational institutions, that it's only really together that we can actually move the dial. And so I guess what I want to say is where I am right now with JobTrain is we need to work together if we're actually going to change anything materially. And that's really what, if I could leave a message, it would be roll your sleeves up with these kinds of movements, and let's get together and see what happens when we bring the power of public policy, the power of education, the power of corporate engagement and all the rest to a set of issues. Watch what happens when we get unified behind that.
And I mean, along those lines, you see every day the future of work, right? Or excuse me, the future of work and lifelong learning.
Yes.
Because that's what you're doing. I
That's
mean,
what we're doing.
your programs are training people and retraining people.
That's right.
For occupations of the future. And so, yeah, it's so critical that there's open lines of communication so that government, for example, is learning from you what works and what doesn't, so that we can try to scale that up at a much bigger level. Because you're seeing every day what works and what doesn't in terms of lifelong learning. And how we can do that better.
In a way, I think of JobTrain, and this will seem like it's coming from a place of hubris, but it's really not. I think of what JobTrain does as the shape of a version of the shape of things to come around skills education broadly in the world. It's very specific to skills. It's rapid turn because people need to get that quickly and move on. It's really a lot of lessons can be learned from the way we do it, and we have a lot to learn from everybody else at the table as well.
And I would encourage everyone in the audience to please pay attention to the organizations and companies in your various communities, because GSVLabs is a very good example. They were in Redwood City for a long time on the current campus of where Stanford University has built their Redwood City campus. And GSVLabs was personally very important to me when I was on the council. And I wanted to make sure, no offense, Mr. Berman, that they stay in San Mateo County. So we were able to connect them with thank you City of San Mateo, because GSVLabs is located in the City of San Mateo now. It is important for all of us to pay attention, because economic development is really, in our area, more about business retention and future jobs than it is about business attraction. People come here, they're going to continue to come here, and they want to come here. So it is companies like that and their model that are so important for all of us. But we want to open it up for Q&A. So the microphone is going around. I know there's a question in the back.
Here and there.
Please.
So my question is...
Could you identify yourself
Oh,
just
yes,
so they know?
I'm Barrie Hunter. I'm a legislative aide for Supervisor Horsley. And so my question is, it seems as though all of this innovation is somewhat inevitable. And we kind of already know that with this tech innovation, sometimes, if not most of the time, marginalized communities get left behind. So I'm wondering where you see the opportunities for equity and justice in these innovations, and is that something that the companies developing the tech need to think about, or is that something that the government needs to sort of play catch up and realize we're leaving a lot of our citizens behind with all of this innovation and all of this new tech?
Well, I could speak to that. I mean, it kind of goes back to what Jenny, who was the earlier presenter, was talking about, because you have to, there's quite a bit of finesse that needs to take place as you go into certain communities, or, you know, as my experience has been. Some communities embrace it, and again, we want to make sure we scale. We want to scale everywhere, and that includes every part of the county, despite whatever challenges there are with, you know, from the technical backbone connectivity piece. But I think, you know, you really have to listen to those folks, because sometimes you'll walk into the, you know, and you go to these community meetings, and you have folks that really embrace it, and they want to be able to have that smart parking option on their iPhone, or they want to be able to know where they can park their electric vehicle. But there's also a big part of that population who could care less about an electric vehicle and don't want you to spend the money on that infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And it could be a senior. You know, the seniors that I spoke to in this one location, they were saying, we don't drive anymore. We rather get the programming for our senior center. Maybe we rather have an iPad, whatever the case may be. And then there's another fear. There's parts of the community who fear the technology coming in because they fear gentrification. They fear that a lot of these added value or benefits it doesn't really have an impact on them. It has an impact on other people who are now going to move into their community. So you have to kind of go in and just understand like you have to look at the community as a whole. Yes, we can easily go in and say, yes, we have a blank canvas and we can do, air quality monitors, free public Wi-Fi, smart parking. We'll put a nice, beautiful kiosk that has nice little shiny and it blings. And it does wayfinding and get you to where? Is it going to help that little bodega on the corner? Is it going to help, the family-owned business that's been on that commercial corridor that we were talking about earlier? Are they being left out? So I think, yes, at the end of the day, we don't want to do anything anywhere in the county that's not scalable to every part of it, whether it's north, south, coastal, or the Bay. But we have to be careful that we are listening to the folks that live and work there, that we are meeting their needs from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I think transportation, we can all agree, is one of the battlegrounds for this. And I think there's, to answer your question, both, right? I mean, there's companies that are out there changing the options, and they need to be thoughtful about being inclusive of who their customers are. And but I don't think that it can be left solely up to the private sector. LA and the cities are thinking about how to enact policies that are not overly restrictive, but encourage the right kinds of behaviors. So if I use the micromobility as the perfect example, last mile, first mile transportation is huge factor, and is rethinking how you can get access to better transportation into communities that have historically not had it. But as we've seen, that's not necessarily how it gets distributed. So what LA did was they actually built into their permitting process, encouraged the companies to get lower. It was through lower permit fees. They could get more vehicles in LA, but only when deployed to neighborhoods that were identified as disadvantaged communities. And so that was I think a pretty good starting point, but it also comes with not having to have a cell phone and a credit card necessarily to use these things, and thinking about the technology and how the user is going to interact is critical to it. And then I think the cities being able to start to change and rapidly iterate on policies that encourage the right kinds of equitable distribution is going to be critical as well.
Benny?
It's
Yep.
on.
Yes. Benny Lee, County of San Mateo, Director of Public Wi-Fi. Many years ago, I remember getting hacked on a computer, and nowadays, it's actually happening widespread. Our elections got hacked in 2016. Cities have been disrupted to the point where it took them tens of millions of dollars to recover. Cybersecurity is very important. Even on IoT, I recall hearing about a casino being hacked, and it cost them over $100,000 to recover because of a simple fish thermometer. So where does cybersecurity play into this?
This is for you.
Okay, I can talk to that. That's a good question. It's very important. Right now, in the stage of the lab, currently, we have strategically chosen use cases that would have very little impact if there was some type of breach. So we're talking about, we're not using camera technologies. We're not really doing, I wouldn't say, mission critical things. We're kind of, let's just test how the sensors work as a use case that's more of, again, it's quality of life stuff. It's government efficiency, but it's not having to deal with folks and their privacy and their private information or their facial features and facial recognition. And so we purposely stood out of that whole, particularly cameras, because it's more of a policy needs to be in place before we move forward with that. We've seen other cities in the country where, Seattle, for example, was sued because they had these cameras up and running, but they had no policy about how they're using the data. And then the ACLU, it was in that lawsuit. Same thing with Boston. So in the county, we didn't want to be in that position we just want to start with small, and just say, let's take some use cases where the IoT, the security piece is built into the solution. And so when we're talking about, so that data is protected, it's off-prem, it's in the cloud, and we have been relying on, we partner with Google in certain situations because they've been a great partner thus far. But we are aware of it, and we are working internally with our own IT department to look to address some of those issues as it relates to those hardware. And we're not doing processing out on the streets yet, too. Quote like, what do you call it? Processing. I forget. But anyway, where you have like things where it's monitoring your traffic signals and things like that. I always think of Die Hard 3 or 4, which one was it? And the bad guy was able to like change all the lights in Manhattan. That was like the scariest thing in America. It was like, how did he do that? So they can get they were going to blow up parts of Manhattan, and so yeah. But we're not there. We're not having those types of use cases.
But please go ahead.
No, I was just to your point. It is a huge concern. I don't think anyone, certainly on this stage in the world at this point, is going to say that, no, don't worry about it. We are seeing a huge surge in early stage companies now, and a lot in VC backing around the issue of cybersecurity, specifically in smart cities, and digital health is actually one of the most vulnerable areas for cybersecurity attacks. But there is a lot of growth. We're seeing more of like a PaaS or platform as a service approaches that are really going to be able to provide, that lockdown. That being said, we've always had a certain amount of risk in these systems, and I think that governments and certainly private businesses that we work with, that's something that we're going to have to balance.
I think cyber should be the fourth program for you, Barrie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's funny. Yeah. Cybersecurity is one of those examples of where we just so get in each other's way about this. There are a dramatic number of job openings for cybersecurity workers. And yet employers insist on people who have, for those jobs, who have multiple years of experience before they will even hire them. An organization like JobTrain, Kenyatta College, we can help somebody with the skills they need to develop to be cybersecurity analysts and workers, but employers are putting barriers up to them to hire them. They're asking for a college degree when it's not necessary. They're asking for years of experience, and so they have this labor shortage that they can help solve by creating apprenticeship opportunities and growing their own. So this is back to where if we put our heads together collectively on these sorts of issues, we can solve some of these problems. Right now, a big problem in cybersecurity is there aren't enough cybersecurity workers to keep their arms around everything that's going on. It's one of the ways we can help.
And I mean, just to emphasize Barry's point, we're doing this in every industry, and companies are their own worst enemy when it comes to this. I had a conversation with Jenny Dearborn, who gave the keynote a few years ago, and she used to work at SAP, a German headquartered company that has a very different mentality around qualifications, and it's more of a sort of apprenticeship model. Yep. Where you get a couple of years of education and then you go work for the company and you build those skills on the job. And you're absolutely right that we put so many barriers in front of people who are plenty qualified and have the skills and intellect to do these jobs. But when we require master's degrees or higher, we just kind of carve out so many folks. I also think the government has an important role to play. Especially in the election space. I had a bill a couple of years ago to create the California Office of Elections Cybersecurity. And we were the first state in the country to have a statewide Office of Election Cybersecurity that works with all 58 counties throughout the state, because San Mateo County is very lucky in terms of the resources and the progressiveness that it has. But we have plenty of counties across the state who operate their own election systems as a county-run program, but who don't necessarily know best practices around cybersecurity. So, there are roles where the state can, it's much more efficient for us to hire a few people and pass that knowledge down, as opposed to every county or every city having to set up their own different cybersecurity offices.
How many organizations in the audience have either apprenticeship programs or hire interns? So and how many of everyone in the audience actually participated at some point in their life in either an apprenticeship or an internship? So I'm asking you to raise your hand because it gives us all an idea of where the areas we need to do more work on. Encourage those companies to find more internship opportunities. Look at, I mean, frankly, the German, the European model is really about apprenticeships and skill building and certificates and work-based knowledge. So in thinking about it. But I'm trying to see if someone else has a question out there. Up over in the right, my right corner.
Anybody with a mic?
Thank you. Afshin Oskouei, I'm the city manager for City of Belmont and a recovering public works guy.
Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you. But kind of to the point, I think we are a society that's really data rich but information poor. And I think that the challenge that I see, and kudos to the concept of SMC Labs, is really having a platform where we can all, as organizations, government entities, because we don't have the bandwidth and we don't have necessarily all the expertise, on how do we tap into the data and to what purpose. And I think that's what's lacking. I mean, the LA model where you can kind of parse out some of those data and be useful in creating a platform for the other agencies is really helpful. So this is more of a comment than a question, but I think to the extent that the tech companies, the innovation, the programs out there can not only just look at the innovation of the tools, but how do we get that data and how do we utilize it to kind of useful purposes is also helpful, because we definitely, given the speed of government and the bandwidth that we have, we don't quite have the same ability to stay up with the development that's going on in the tech industry.
Yeah, so I'll just say for the purpose of SMC Labs, you know, one of the things that we wanted to do and make sure to do on the front end is to make sure the data is robust and it's good data that we can share. And so we're in the process of doing that for air quality monitoring. But everything, we're ultimately what we would like to do is create a marketplace. So you can just kind of go to our website and find like all the use cases that we have piloted and played with, and we'll tell you, we'll be very honest and say which works and what doesn't work. So we want to share that so you don't have to duplicate that. We understand that all the cities within the county, they're small and medium size. And you guys have been very good with the technology piece, particularly with, I know there was a project with Audi and Volkswagen with your connected traffic signals, which is great. So an Audi can actually go in and gets the countdown on their dashboard when you drive down Belmont. But when you leave Belmont, of course, it goes away. And that's the whole point of having that consistency of scale of new technologies. But yes, we plan on creating that marketplace. And we plan to engage, you know, all cities and any agency within your city, Public Works, because we work closely with our Public Works agency, and a lot of those use cases definitely are similar. So
I'd add definitely, you know, that is a great question. I think for lots of industries, transportation included. There's more and more data. Big data, I don't think it should be the focus. It should be thoughtful data, meaning what are the use cases before we start collecting it, and really, especially in the public sector, thinking about what data we keep and what data we just look at, and then how, and then open data is a part of that too. It's you know, cities have done a great job of starting to open data sets and create transparency, and I think sharing it out to you know, to the community, to academics, to others that can really start to help to build shared insights from the data is critical. And I just want to mention one other thing that I've neglected to mention earlier, which is that all the work that we did for LADOT, it was in open source, but what it's now is happening is LA's helped to lead the foundation of something called the Open Mobility Foundation, which is, I think, 15 cities now, city-led foundation to house the open source, the open standards, and the best practices for these types of programs. It includes New York, Chicago, San Francisco, San Jose, Austin, Texas, Miami, and even international cities like Bogota, Colombia, and Montreal are starting to come along. And the other critical piece of this is that it's city-led, but there is a technology council as well, which means that there are companies that will come, like Microsoft is one of the founders, to bring tools and really help cities to build, because we know that cities don't have all the resources to build all this, against those city-led initiatives. So that's I think the other critical piece of what we're doing, and it does start to address some of what you're saying, which is, it has to be a shared methods for getting value out of data, not just a simple mechanism to give me the data.
Mm-hmm.
So on behalf of Assemblymember Berman and I and our whole Connect team, thank you so much to our panel.